The original Model D Wireless is one of the first few lightweight mice that broke into the FPS gaming scene. I, however, don't just click on buttons to click on heads, because sometimes I click on the wall behind the opponent instead. There is, of course, also work, scripting, shooting, and editing videos for the channel. Can the Model D Wireless improve gaming performance without sacrificing too much in terms of productivity? Being one of the earliest mice into the lightweight trend, the Model D Wireless has honeycomb cutouts on the top and bottom of the mouse to reduce weight while still providing structural integrity. More on how the shape of the mouse feels in the hand in the gaming section of the video. The mouse weighs 69 grams and is now considered a regular weight, given the amount of mice that are now under the 60-gram mark. Obviously, this doesn't make a bad mouse. It was considered incredibly light on first release. For physical features, the Model D can only connect via the USB receiver and has no storage section for the receiver on the mouse itself. But that's fine since the receiver isn't obtrusive. Instead, underneath there's the power switch and DPI LED indicator in the bottom of the mouse. I don't know why it's on the bottom, but it's effectively useless, because most people would just click the DPI button and then figure out which sensitivity works for them. But there is an advantage to having a DPI button. Even with the weight reduction, the gamer RGB still persists, and is only customizable via the Glorious Core software. If you do run through the 71 hours of battery life, which is at least 10 hours a day with the RGB off, connecting the cable is not too much of a hindrance and is still one of the lightest and most flexible cables I've used so far. Where in gaming, the cable doesn't feel like it gets in the way, yet it is still noticeable if you do pay attention to it. Now, how does it feel in games? The Glorious Model D is meant for gaming with a regular 1000Hz polling rate, and it's at the time almost excessively light at 69 grams, just making it under the 70-gram mark. Of course, now mice are moving well under the weight of 60 grams, with a few stand out under 50. It doesn't mean that the Model D is no longer competitive, as it's mostly the skills that make a person competitive in any game. But it's a shape that makes a difference in experience. The Model D is an ergo mouse, where the highest point of the hump is in front of the sensor, with a shallow taper to the right-hand side into the grip, rotating the wrist to a slightly more relaxed pronated position. The right-hand grip has a comfort groove that seats my ring finger that tapers out to a wider back, pushing out the pinky so that it doesn't feel like I'm pinching the mouse. For the left side grip, it's a slight convex shape that tapers into the bottom of the mouse with a curved thumb rest that seats my thumb directly in between the side buttons. These side buttons themselves have almost no pre-travel, with a soft yet not mushy bottom out. The DPI button is hard to press even compared to the middle click in the scroll. When scrolling, the wheel has a large rounded and smooth tactile bumps. As for the main left and right clicks, they are on the lighter side for most of the mice I've tested, with the pointer and middle finger landing on the comfort grooves naturally. For how the Model D feels in grip styles, personally my main grip style is the carpal stabilized claw grip. I do like how it tucks into the base of my palm at an angle, setting the resting position at a relaxed angle. Moving to a palm grip, I find it a little less comfortable, because I find that the hump is too close to the center of the mouse, that the most comfortable position to be in has the entire right side of my hand scraping the mouse pad. But it does add some control and stopping power. When in game, I move between a carpal stabilized claw to a forward palm grip in order to steady the mouse, which adds a lot more pressure to the knuckle area, especially on the left hand side. Not too much that it's horrible, just noticeable. But I only use that grip in short bursts that it isn't much of an issue. There are much more issues on fingertip, where the rear of the grip on the right hand side feels like it sticks out a little too much and adds a little too much pressure to the pinky. But it's a grip I tend to move into when aiming down sights with snipers, and in a game where there's a lot of verticality of movement, such as Apex or Overwatch. Otherwise, it's not a grip I would use constantly. What I do constantly is move between gaming and productivity, such as working on the channel. You'd be surprised what a single extra button can do for you. Bringing me to the work or quality of life improvements. Not only is the Model D light, but it also pushes your grip into a less pronated position, which can lead to less fatigue in the long run. But I've also used much heavier mice without issues, where unlike those heavier mice that tend to feature a lot of extra buttons, there's only technically one on the Model D if you don't include the side buttons. The DPI button is technically a relic of a bygone era where some players would change their sensitivity when moving in between hipfire and aiming down sights. Now, this is done automatically in-game, which means once you've settled into a DPI that you prefer, it becomes almost a useless button. Now we get into the Glorious Core software that allows us to change what it can do. My default is to change it to play and pause media. What I don't like about the Glorious Core software is it feels clunky and bare bones. Plus side is there's no ads on first page when it boots up. You can change the DPI manually if you already know your preferred DPI, including the liftoff distance, debounce time, and polling rate. And yes, you can use and create macros, but what it doesn't do is have profiles depending on what application your mouse is hovering over. You're also highly limited at 3 different profiles. You might be thinking, why would that matter for a gaming mouse? Because that useless DPI button could have been more useful, and even the side buttons. For example, in Word, the DPI button can be used to highlight text with the Alt Control H shortcut, or even change them between capitalized and non-capitalized with the Shift F3 shortcut. But then I can move directly into an editing software without having to go back into Glorious Core to manually change profiles in order to change what the buttons do again. Now the DPI button changes to B, giving me easy access to the blade tool in order to properly trim forwards and backwards using the side buttons, using the Control Shift bracket shortcuts. This may seem like a small thing, the quality of life improvement of not having to think about which profile to use does feel amazing. You can even use those profiles to change the polling rate and turn on or off RGB to increase the battery life when you aren't gaming, because obviously turning on the RGB adds FPS. The Glorious Model D is a gaming mouse. While it's not meant to have extra productivity or work features, it's also why I'm complaining about it, because there are gaming mice which doesn't sacrifice gaming performance for productivity and vice versa, which you can find on this video. Make sure to subscribe for more content on tech and their ability for both productivity and gaming. I'm your host Naka. Have a nice one. The sheer amount of the shape of my D jokes I wanted to make just because it's called the Model D is way too